So, welcome, Patrice. We are so thrilled to have you here talking with Live Prosperous and partnering with us to help people prosper as they journey through life. My name is Beth Shaha, a certified master life coach, and grateful to be a part of Live Prosperous myself. I've gotten to know you a little bit, and you are just truly a gem. And I am thrilled to be able to share you with the Live Prosperous community. So, I'd love to begin helping people get to know you because we're going to see you popping up more and more in our community and offering all of your goodness. So let's just start real big and then we'll kind of drill down if that's okay. Could you start by sharing just a bit about your background? I know that you've worked extensively in corporate affairs and public affairs, but you also incorporate mindfulness and grief processing. So that's a lot. So I'm wondering, how did all these areas come together and possibly lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, I am extremely excited to be here. So thank you. Thank you, Beth. Hello, Live Prosperous
Yes,
community.
yes.
And here we go. So, as Beth mentioned, my name is Patrice Webb. I actually live here in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. But I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I have lived in the state of California for a number of years as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think when people listen in on something like this or they're watching a video on, it's good to kind of geographically see where people are, right? So, being from Baltimore, then all the way over to Cali, then
Yeah,
back to DC. I'm in Pennsylvania. So if you're listening, just imagine that geographic, image and it helps to kind of bring us all closer together. So thank you for
exactly,
saying.
exactly. And since I'll take the invitation on
Yeah.
including the geography. And I was in Southern Cal or SoCal for those of
Okay.
you there
Okay.
in the Venice Beach area. How did I end up here? Life happens. And eventually, hopefully, we can all figure out what that next rhythm is. And that's what I've invested my life in doing.
Hmm.
So as you mentioned, Beth, my background is educationally, it's in political science, public affairs, and also philosophy. I've very much enjoyed understanding how other people think, how I think, and how my thinking habits have changed over the years.
Hmm. Hmm.
I also became an organizational scientist studying here at GW a few years ago and coming at the experience of life with the science background,
Yeah.
in addition to my lived experience, which was very much, as you mentioned, corporate affairs, public affairs, and then moving around the country as I did. I'll also say that for a number of years, I also worked for the ACLU on issues of voting rights and amongst other things, when 9/11 happened in 2001, I was one of the organizers on the ground who went out to some of the most rural parts of our country, and really being in community then really opened my eyes to how incredibly different we all are and how
Hmm.
we see everything from the lens of what we've experienced. That all happened very early in my career, which all fed into, as I mentioned, eventually becoming an organizational scientist a few years ago. So when you mold all of that academia, if you will, together with the practical experiences that I was able to have, I really started to understand my main mission, I believe, in this world, is to infuse curiosity and to practice it in my daily life and to be able to spread that to others. And curiosity, I believe, is being present to observe without judging, which
Hmm.
is really, really hard to do, especially when you're coming from a place of like policy and politics and power.
Sure. Sure.
And then we're all humans, so we all at some point have desires and wants, and then we can feel vulnerable about the things that we want, because we don't understand how to be okay with
Hmm.
that feeling of wanting something else or something more for ourselves. So I'm sort of giving you 30,000 foot, and
Yeah.
over the next couple of weeks, months, years in front of us, I'll obviously be able to share more and offer more insight into how I got here. But how I got here today
Uh-huh.
is basically that journey of being now in a place where I'm heavily focused, fully focused on not only living the best life possible for my own self, and I mean that in the deepest level. I'm not
Hmm.
talking about the clothes I wear or the places I go. I'm talking about the thoughts in my head. I'm talking
Mm.
about the words that come out of my mouth. and
Hmm.
talking about my ability to be in the best relationship possible with my own emotions, and then being able to share that through my work as an advisor and as a coach.
Yes, I love that. So thinking about that, you in your language you use the phrase "become their own sage." You encourage people to decipher between believing and knowing when they're experiencing pain and struggle. Talk to me a little bit about that and what that looks like.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Our minds are absolutely amazing.
Uh-huh.
From a science perspective, the body is hardwired for empathy. And what does that look like? It looks like when you take an inhale and an exhale, when you swallow, when you yawn. The body is wired to care for itself. But
Hmm.
we tend to move so incredibly fast throughout our day because of external factors or habits that we've built that we don't pay attention to those very small measures that tell us our body needs something.
Hmm.
What happens is because the body is doing what it does autonomically,
Right,
if you will,
right,
and then we start doing things automatically, like driving a car. Like, how many people can tell you how many turns they make on their way home from X to Y, and they do this every day? Not everybody can tell you that. Some people can, because things become autonomic or automatic, excuse me, and therefore you're not necessarily paying as much time to it. The same thing
hmm
in that physical sense happens with our thoughts. So, how
right,
many times have you thought, I'd really like to go try that. Or I want to figure out how that person achieved that. And before you know it, you have spiraled through, I want to know, all the way to, I don't deserve it. I could never get it. That's not for me. I hate that they have that, or using other types of limiting belief words like that. And then
right,
before you know it, you've never even tried this thing that you started off with so much curiosity having.
right,
And that's the belief part.
right,
The knowing part is, for example, when you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go to the bathroom. There is no question. You
yeah,
don't need a second opinion. You don't, hopefully, you're not telling yourself, I don't really need to go to the bathroom.
right.
But, so the difference is a thought, belief is up here. It's
Hmm.
subjective. It's oftentimes influenced by external factors. The knowing is in here. There's never a question. Am I hungry? Do I have something in my tooth that I can feel?
Right.
Do I have to blow my nose? Am I going to sneeze? Those are all things that we know.
Uh-huh.
And so for the last couple of years, thanks to the invitation of COVID, I've really spent a lot of time for myself first, before, of course, extending this resource to others, to understand, when is it that I go all in on the belief versus when I go all in on the knowing. And
Mm,
in a nutshell, for me, the difference was whether or not I had fear about that belief becoming a knowing. And
mm,
so I love talking about belief. I'm not going to say versus, I'm going to say belief and knowing, and
mhm.
then helping people hear themselves so that they can also understand when they're in belief, when they're in knowing, and what is the distance between those two.
Yes, absolutely. I like to think of it sometimes as clean and dirty thoughts, in the sense of like what's absolute truth and what's the story sometimes we attach to
Yes,
things.
yes,
Just and I do think that there's such power in simply just saying I'm thinking this thought, right? Like that's acceptance commitment therapy. It's simply saying, I notice that I'm having this thought, right? It
yes,
creates distance between the thought and us versus here. And I too work a lot in that knowing from our intuition, from being in alignment with our essential self, our North Star, really knowing and feeling that. But I'm curious, a lot of people, you had mentioned this earlier, we go so fast through life that we don't, oftentimes people can't even slow down to feel that or hear it.
yeah.
So, just out of practical advice, what's something you would tell people about how do you just start getting to hear that knowing and feeling that knowing if you haven't even tapped into it?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And frankly, I think that somewhere in that question is like the fountain of youth, if you will.
Yes.
um, you know, so this is really where my curiosity around the role of grief and how it shows up kind of comes in also, is the breath.
Yeah.
Again, I always start with noticing, what am I doing? Because I feel like I don't want to, or better yet, I would much rather have a conversation with somebody who's looking to improve their relationship with themselves once I've been through the fire, if you will, on
Yeah.
whatever that topic is. Yes, I have the academic training. I understand cognitively the concepts, but at the same time, we as human beings, we feel each other's energy. So if I feel like somebody else has already dug in the mud, then I'm more likely to give them more
Yeah.
space, whatever it is they might have to say. So I'll answer that question from how I started to learn for myself. It was my breath. I started noticing that when things would happen, and I think actually it was my mother's voice where it kind of kicked in first. When things happen, let's say on a negative vibration or disappointing news, sad news, we kind of go, and it's
Mm.
just a holding of the breath. And if you
Mhm.
see like my whole shoulders like
Yeah.
is sort of hunched over,
Yes.
that is me carrying whatever the weight of that thing is. And somebody oftentimes may have to say, take an exhale and
Yeah.
and then you
Kind of
realize,
like when you're watching
so
a horror movie and you're like, you're just scared, right? Like
exactly,
everything
shoulders
tenses.
go up,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Mhm.
in somatic practice, also the sort of caved over is like the burden, it's the weight of whatever is happening. So once I started noticing that, of course, going through dance class as a child, you remember stand up straight, shoulders back, head up. And so I physically started noticing I was doing that. And then I could hear my own voice. And then I realized again, when something funny happened or surprising happened, it was like, and the shoulders went up. It was a smile or it was a laugh. And when you're laughing, you're letting the air out.
Uh-huh.
So, in the most simplest terms, when something scares us, we typically inhale. When
Mhm.
something elates us joyfully, if you will, we're typically exhaling through laughter.
Mhm.
So both of those behaviors can trigger a different response within our nervous system, which is it doesn't have a voice, right? It just has emotion, and it's such an important teacher for all of us. So the noticing of the breath for me is the easiest way that I can understand where I am or where a
Mhm.
client might be.
Mhm.
And then secondarily would be posture for
Yeah.
myself when I do the I'm like, oh man, I'm carrying something and I immediately want to change it, change that disposition. And the same thing.
Right, right. Even when you were hunched over, it's like you are carrying something, right? It's your posture says, I've got a backpack on, right? So
Exactly.
it's that posture to say, what am I carrying? And that could look like a variety of things. It could look like I'm caring for my aging parents. It could look like I'm carrying the looming deadline for this project at work. It could be I'm carrying a relationship that isn't life-giving anymore, right? So what you're carrying could be a variety of things, but it's just the noticing of carrying it,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me, I also find sometimes it's a body scan. Because
Mhm.
I may not notice unless I literally am sitting there. Sometimes I'll do it even before I get out of bed, and I'll just notice where there's any tension or there's anything that needs my attention. And sometimes it's back to what you were saying, that curiosity. I wonder
Mhm.
why I feel this right here. I wonder what's going on there. Why am I short of breath? Why are, sometimes it's because I played pickleball too much the day before, but other times it's because I have something else that's bothering me, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I believe in all that. That's cool.
Yeah. I
Um,
would I would just quickly add to that also one of the things that so I'm a dog person, nothing
yes,
against
dog
cat
foster.
people. I love all animals, but I have a dog.
Yeah,
And I'm lucky enough to be able to take care of this dog. And my dog is a rescue. And so she comes with her own stories, right? And she's a dog, so her brain is not quite as dynamic as ours as a human.
right.
And one of the other gifts that when you get to live with animals is that watching them, they're your mirror. They're our mirror. So that's also another cheat, if you will, if you're not really sure how you're feeling,
Oh, interesting.
notice how your
Right.
animals are behaving around you.
All right. So
It's a
anybody
very, very
listening that
sensitive.
has an animal, you should be looking at that animal, and that's your mirror.
Yes.
Whoa. They say a lot of owners of dogs start to look alike,
Yes.
but also feel alike. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
interesting. All right, awesome. So let's flip just a little bit to more of, organizations that you've worked with and kind of the sense of using this knowing in the workplace, and kind of thinking like, when you work with organizations, how do you help leaders? With Live Prosperous, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, high achievers, athletes, musicians, lots of people that want to achieve the best that they can be, right? So how do you help them when we're thinking about leadership and mindfulness and being their own sage? How do you help them bridge that gap to kind of have this whole life balance, integration, something like that? Tell me about that, your
Sure.
experience.
Yeah, I mean, in simplest forms, I would say very much inspired by 5-year-olds that say, "Well, why? Why? Why did we do it that?"
Yes.
And I'm not quite that crass with just asking why, but it's
Yes.
back to the incredibly invaluable resource of curiosity.
Yes.
That's the main way in.
Hmm.
Most of us, as I mentioned, especially leaders, and I don't mean just a leader in title. I mean, all of us technically are leaders in our own worlds and in our family, in our
Right.
community, et cetera.
Hmm.
But in the workplace, especially, you are showing up as a leader, hopefully, and then you are also responsible for other people. So it is the mission, and it's also tasks within that mission that you may be responsible for, or responsible for motivating others.
Right.
So your curiosity can get spread really thin really quickly when you
Yeah.
are, have more than 3 direct reports, for example, or if you're working towards a massive deadline that has risks if anything is missed that then could be potential snowballs, if you will.
Right.
So if you're a leader, then you're constantly thinking about all of that.
Hmm.
And then you're thinking about also you as a human. Hopefully you need to get sleep, you need to get exercise, you need to make sure that you're well taken care of,
Yes.
so that
Yes.
you can show up in those places with curiosity.
Hmm.
So the practice of curiosity, I believe, you just mentioned actually in the tail end of that last conversation, is the body scan. So having awareness, where am I right now? Is often how I will work with my clients and ask them to tell me, where are they? And usually I'm in my office, I'm on the whatever floor, I'm sitting, and I'm like, no, no, that's where you are physically, but where are you? Like, what
Uh-huh.
is on your mind?
Uh-huh.
And once people start talking and they're being invited to talk about what is in their mind, sometimes they're often very surprised with what comes out of their mouth. They didn't realize that they were still thinking about a decision that they had made 2 months ago, or
Hmm.
that they're still thinking about a decision that wasn't made a month
Yeah.
ago. So, in the space of curiosity, I would put along those lines in terms of practice, being curious about how you make decisions.
Hmm.
How does the organization make decisions? Does that align with the strategy that you've laid out? Hopefully, there is a strategy. And if you don't have a strategy, then it's good time to say, what is the strategy?
Yeah. Get
And does
curious about that.
everyone, yes, and does everyone understand it? And does everyone understand the role they play in delivering on it?
Mm.
Many organizations deal with conflict, which is another topic I like to talk about, because people don't understand how what they do or don't do rolls into the bigger picture. And
Hmm.
so people would use the word accountability, and in some cultures, some organizational cultures, that word accountability can feel really prickly. It can also feel full of judgment. And that's an indication that the culture of that organization deserves a little bit of curiosity as well.
Yeah.
And I'll be very explicit in saying, with organizational culture, there's the stated culture and then there's the default culture.
Yes.
So it's for both to be, and sometimes, if not sometimes, but you have the organization wide and then you have teams, and those teams may have in different intentional cultures.
Hmm.
And then you have
Sure.
the default culture. So at any given time, you can have people who identify as working for an organization, who identify what their title and responsibilities are, but can't exactly identify how they make decisions, how the organization makes decisions, and how what they do or don't do can impact the bottom line. And
Hmm.
all of that in my strategy rolls into being able to be as curious as possible at all times without judgment.
Hmm.
Not to say that you over ask questions, meaning that you belabor everything and nobody makes any decisions. You absolutely have to put parameters on. We're going to talk about this in an ideation phase for whatever the period of time is, and then we're going to make decisions.
Hmm.
And so just being able to lean on your curiosity and use it to your benefit, not letting it overtake you as a way to deflect from making
Right. Right.
decisions, is, I believe, and based on experience, this is what a lot of organizations are needing. And they
Hmm.
forget to ask that question sometimes. There's tends to be an assumption that everybody gets it. And everybody may
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
10%, 15 or 20%.
Hmm.
But do they really get the how, if they miss this deadline, how many other things won't happen? And what does that cost to the company? And
Hmm.
what is the value of being able to speak up as a leader and say, we missed that deadline or we
Hmm.
missed
Hmm.
this? We need to make a series of different decisions and going about it. And all of that, as I said, like a broken record, it's coming
Yeah.
from a place of being curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this comes back again to how rapid we live life and how fast things are moving. Things that sometimes I'll hear with entrepreneurs or high achievers is, yeah, that's great, but we got to get rolling. And so I love how you talked about, we're curious within parameters, right? Like we do have to meet deadlines. We do have
Yes.
to move forward. We do have to have a plan and strategy and develop that. But at the same time, the quality of our curiosity and how
Mm.
we use that as a navigational tool. I think that is so key. And
Yeah.
there's this nuance that, I'm sure you see when working with organizations and individuals. How do we create that for them? How do they experience it to say, oh yeah, I get it. Like with Live Prosperous, I feel that with our leaders. I feel Bobby, who is our founder, and our president, Sandy. They're curious about things, and they want us to be, and they want that flow and that feel. But I know that that's part of who we are, because
Mhm.
that's what we want for people. But I
Yeah.
do think it's really tricky to take this and plop it into a program or, within organizations and help them feel that, not just tell them, but feel it real quick
Yes.
in a way that's they're like, okay, bought in, let's go. I don't
Yes.
know what you've seen from that.
Yeah. So I'll give an example. Back when I was in corporate, one of my last roles was a national behavior change initiative, if you will. And this was around beverages, which we all drank something every day to
Yes.
stay hydrated. And this industry has been around for over 100 years now. And you say beverages, and everybody has an idea of what that means for them. And they were trying to figure out, or we were trying to figure out, how do we grab the attention of consumers in a way that gets them to consider what they're about to drink. And long of the short is, I came at it with, let's amplify the power of choice. And at first, people were kind of like, what do you mean? What does that mean? What do you mean by
Right.
that? And the power of choice is this. If I go to you and I say, Beth, do you want a green drink or do you want a blue drink? Most people are moving so fast, they're going to say green or they're going to say blue. But if I were to introduce to you, hey, Beth, there's a green and there's a blue, but check out what's on the front of the label. And then you take a few seconds and you read it. You just enjoyed the power of the pause. You took a breath to read whatever
Which
was
I
on
would
the
have
label.
said, by the way, I'd have said, hey, Patrice, tell me about these drinks. What's in them?
Right, right. So
But
yes,
I
so
agree. So oftentimes
yes,
people just like, just give it to me.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you might have even said, I don't want green or blue. Is
Right.
there another choice?
You have
I'd
a
actually
skinny
prefer,
version, a simple
correct.
version.
Whatever it is, the
Yeah.
point is that you're bringing the power of the pause
Yes.
in choice, is that you take that breath we were talking about a few moments
Yeah.
ago, and you really take a chance to get, even it's a millisecond that it happens, but
Uh-huh.
you kind of, actually, I don't want either of those. I want that.
Yeah.
So this campaign, which was reinvigorating a practice of choice that we've had because we're humans, our free will comes with us when we become, humans, but really hadn't practiced because of the rate at which we move typically. This campaign was all about amplifying the value of that power of the pause so that people can make choices. And that dovetailed into providing information on the front of labels for people to read and decide, oh, do I want, caffeine or do I not want caffeine? Do I want
Uh-huh.
bubbles or do I not want bubbles? Do I
Right.
want this or do
Crisp
I
and
not want
refreshing or
whatever?
yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very
And so
interesting.
when we make decisions from a place of, oh, I have a choice in this, I'm going to make a choice in that. The other value back to us is I feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Even something as small as that was maybe 3 seconds of my day. I now feel empowered because I was aware and therefore making a choice that was best for me at that time. So, in doing all of that work, there was a lot of behavior insights. There was a lot of sales data that, of course, we had to crunch. There was a lot of understanding what was happening in the marketplace. And the outcome of that work is what you see now when you go to the grocery store and the beverage aisle, which used to be one, might be three or four. All of
Right.
that is the
All
result
choice.
of utilizing curiosity for choice and the power of pause.
I love that. I love that. And, the power of the pause is a part of my lingo. I just, I love that. But then adding in having choice empowers. It makes you feel you have ownership. You want to be a part of the process. You want to be a part of the beverage. You want to be a part of this situation, this career. And I love that because it really does give it back
Yeah,
to people. And then I do think that's where the quality comes. I do think that's where people invest and say, oh, I feel what this feels like. Now I'm here with you,
yes,
rather than just, having it come at you and being told things, but
exactly.
engaging.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Now I have to ask, you were in the beverage industry. You didn't say which one, but I know a little bit about you. So this must be where you became, and I don't even know how to pronounce this word, the beer sommelier, but it's a cicerone.
Oh, cicerone. So that
Oh,
was
I
that.
did
Yeah, you got that. You got the enunciation right.
good.
That
Okay.
was before
Okay.
the trade association. But yes, I was with an individual privately held company where even though I was on the public affairs, policy, government relations side, the way that I have always worked, as I mentioned, is this tremendous desire to understand. So my curiosity, I reach across the aisles inside of the company to understand, what do I need to know? I need to know everything about the product. I need to know everything I can
Mhm.
about the industry. And the short story is that the leadership at that time agreed. And so everybody got a chance to go and get trained and then take the exam to become a cicerone. Now, let me say this. There are levels to being a cicerone. I am
Okay.
only I made it through level one, so I understand how beer is made, how the company's beer is made in particular, packaging, treatment, taste, flavor, and the experience of how it was made.
Hmm.
Because I know I'm speaking a little bit code because there are, being respectful of all the
Yeah,
different
of
brands.
course. Of course.
Um, every brand is a little different, can be a little different in how it's made. And that's everything from how ingredients are grown, how they're then transported to wherever they need to go to be processed. And then, of course, the relationship between how things are added in to make the liquid, whatever the liquid winds up being. It's no different than if you were to make, your grandmother's recipe cake versus a cake that was in a box. There's going to
Right.
be a different technique, right?
Sure.
But
Sure.
that's where I became a Cicerone level one, to be very
All
clear.
right. So
I
is
didn't
this
do that
something that you use in your daily life, or not daily, but do you,
Yeah,
is this something that every once in a while you just bring out, like it's kind of like this party trick?
absolutely. I absolutely do. I think also as a woman, we tend to have very sensitive noses, and I've always been sensitive to flavors and smells. So becoming a Cicerone was like, it was that extra oomph I needed to say, I smell notes of whatever it is I might smell, because it's fun now to be able to see if I can figure out what the flavors are, and whether or not it was vertical or horizontal fermentation or what have you, whatever the process was based on the strength of the bubbles or carbonation, if that's what's inside of it. So absolutely, it's a party trick.
Yeah, I love that. That's so fun. All right, I can't not ask you about the kindness gangster.
Uh,
I watched your video. Obviously, I heard what I think is so beautiful about you is that You are a live it to give it kind of girl. And I try to be the same. You've gone through it, you work yourself before you try to, give it out. And it's a process, right? And I feel like what you're saying with the kindness gangster ties in to this curiosity, this self-compassion and self-love. So share a little bit about that for those that don't know about it yet. And yeah, I think
Sure.
that's so much fun.
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying I am from Baltimore and it's actually gangsta with an A.
Gangsta, okay.
Yeah, with an A.
Kindness gangsta.
Yes, exactly. And this was another, my perspective on all things that we get to experience in life is that we get to experience them. That's how I choose to live. And during COVID, I took the invitation to spend more and more time understanding who I am and what do I want, and how the things that I've experienced have gotten me to this place. And kindness gangsta comes from me being in a really difficult place after losing my dad very suddenly in my early 20s. And I didn't know how to process it. Um,
Mm,
and I knew that I had to keep going. I knew that that wasn't the end of the story, lived experience story for me, but I didn't know how. This was in 2002. We didn't have the internet. I couldn't just go Google something. And his death was a result of someone who had a psychotic break. Nobody was talking about mental health at that point. We were all talking about the safety and security of our country because 9/11 had just happened. And so I didn't have a role model within reasonable access to help me understand what do I do with this massive loss? And then how do I show up for myself, my family, my friends at work, etc. So I did the thing that I think most of us do, and I just kind of cut myself in half. And when I was at work, I was at work and I had a mask on and did everything I was supposed to do and, was getting awards and traveling and do all the things externally. And when I was at home, it literally felt like I was living in a ditch. I don't know how else to explain it. My
right.
siblings and I talk about that now, and they say that I used to say that all the time. And I remember saying that. I remember feeling like there's got to be more. This can't be it. Like I'm not the first person to lose their father or to lose a parent or a loved one, and definitely not the first person in this way. What do I do? How do I do this? Many years of therapy, and then leaning on my behavior science background, I got really nerdy to just find facts and research to educate myself of how to pull myself out of it. All of that to say, and I'll be sharing more on the platform of all the
Yes, of
things that I
course.
did and all the things that I learned. I got to a place during COVID where we had quiet time because nobody was moving around anywhere. And I was on my bike. If I mention the company, hopefully there'll be some kind of relationship in the future. But I was on my Peloton and I had to pick a name. And I was taking one person's class I really liked the way that she communicated with the other riders. And I'm like, gosh, I don't know. And I just started kind of like, like an exhale that just was so audible.
Wow.
And I realized, and what came out was kindness gangsta. And I was aggressively kind to myself. And I'm on the bike and I'm trying to write it down so I can remember my thoughts when I get off the bike. And so that's where it started. And when I really looked at what I had, just the name, I started realizing that even in advocacy and in public affairs work, my entire strategy was always education, engagement, and unique experiences. Always, every time, no matter where I was, those three pillars were part of what I was doing at work. And kindness gangsta is about kindness, curiosity, and self-awareness. And so those three, all six of those kind of line up with each other, which I didn't
Sure.
even realize until I started working it out. So being a kindness gangsta is about being aggressively kind to yourself first. There is no aggression about that. It is a choice. Being kind to ourselves includes going to sleep when we're tired, in the bathroom when you have
Yeah.
to go, eating something if you're hungry, the most simplest behaviors that we
Yeah.
do for ourselves and recognizing them as kindness. And
Mm.
when I talk about this, especially with young people, this summer I did a lecture series up in Baltimore, and I would ask them every time to define kindness, curiosity, and self-awareness. And every time they defined kindness, the response from them was what you do for others. And I
Mm.
completely understand and agree with them.
Right.
And then I also introduced them to the idea that being kind to yourself is your setup for how you're going to show up. So if
Yeah.
you skip yourself and just try to be kind to others, you're actually doing yourself and your intent to be a kind person a disservice. So if you start with self, put on a jacket if it's cold outside. That's a kind gesture to yourself.
Mhm.
Everything else will already fall in line because you're starting that way. And so I've made it part of my work because I realized just telling people about it and also just being a human that we are not very kind to ourselves.
Yes.
And it takes effort. So I want everybody to
Fascinating.
be a kindness gangster.
I love it. I love it. It's thank you for sharing in your vulnerability. With dealing with your father's passing, you said, I felt like I was split in half and I went to work and I did these things. I put on my mask. I did the things I needed to do, got the awards, did that, but then you'd come home and, you thought to yourself, gosh, I can't be the only one. But that in itself is a self-kindness to say, I don't like where I am right now. This is not where this can't be it, right?
Yeah.
And I've gone through that myself where I woke up one day and was just thinking, this can't be it. And I knew that there was more, but it's almost like peeling yourself. You remember when we used to put putty down on the silly putty and we would put it on like a comic and we'd peel it off?
Yes.
That's how I felt too, right? It's like you're just kind of laying there, like you said, a ditch. And
Yes.
and it's peeling yourself up enough to say, okay, I'm going to get curious about this. And it
Yes.
is a process. Self-awareness is such a beautiful journey, and it can be really difficult and it can hurt and it can be painful, but the beauty comes with, continuing to stay curious,
Mhm.
showing yourself this kindness, I like to think of curious compassion, right? Like we're curiously interested, but we're showing ourselves the compassion the whole way through, like you said, rather than judgment. And
Yes.
I just appreciate that so much. I think it's relatable. I think a lot of people have, possibly something that's really weighing them or keeping them in one space while they're trying to exist in this world,
Yeah.
society, culture, all of this.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate the perspective.
I want to add one more thing to this
Go
this
ahead.
conversation because it's just always on my mind. Our Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, Dr. Vivek Murthy, wrote a book a couple of years ago that came out about loneliness based on research that had been done
Mm,
about the prevalence of loneliness. And my question to both the Live Prosperous community, to myself, to you, Beth, and anybody else who might get a chance to hear what we're talking about is what does that mean? From my vantage point and what I've been through, and I've shared a little bit today, I absolutely felt lonely at
mm,
moments.
mhm.
And it did feel like nobody else knows. It did feel like, how do I even open up to somebody? How am I
Yeah.
going to make, as adults, some people say they have challenges making friends. How do you make adult friends when that's your story? And when people say, are your parents still with you or where might they be,
Mhm.
And I started to realize in order for me to move through this, as painful as it was, I had to find a way to turn um, that word to temporary. So I
Mm,
had to make it a temporary experience as
mhm.
opposed to a permanent label. And for
Mhm.
me, the way that I have done that, and I hope to be able to be part of our team, the Live Prosperous team, helping others do this, is to understand that when we feel anything, whether it's the feeling of loneliness or what have you, is to remember that it's temporary
Mm, mhm.
and to ask ourselves, does this feeling help me? Am I happy? Am I content with this? And if not, do something about it. For
Mm,
me, it was phoning a friend or sending a text message or going for a walk. Uh, this is when I started to get into dog fostering as well. So I just want to call that out. It's
yes.
incredibly prevalent to feel like you're the only one, to feel like you are lonely. And
Mhm.
that is a feeling. no doubt about it. And the opportunity is always there to say, what can I do about it? And I'm not saying that in a dismissive way by
Mm,
any means to people who may be dealing with, clinical depression or something like that.
sure.
We all have to feel our feelings and be curious about them.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you brought that up. And I think loneliness, can live on so many levels. It can be feeling like you're the only one going through this. It can be feeling like nobody knows I'm going through this. It could be when you're at the top, a leader, a high performing entrepreneur, a musician, it's just you might feel it in a variety of different ways, but it all comes back to, that desire for human connection, the desire to be seen and heard, to really be able to figure out, okay, what can I do? And,
Yeah.
sometimes it looks like, just going outside and letting the sun hit your face for 20 minutes. It could be something basic. But I love that concept of a temporary label versus I forget what you said, but like
Yeah.
what
It's
did
a
you say?
temporary feeling versus
Feeling?
a permanent label.
Permanent label.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
And I think we could do that. My daughter's in college and she recognizes that you first year, freshman year, she's struggling a little bit because it's hard to be away from home. And so every once in a while she'll text me and say, I'm feeling tempression. And that's her word, right?
I
And
like
it's like,
that.
right? So, but that's exactly what you're saying. Like,
Yes.
it's not, we're not saying that it's something bigger, unless of course it is. And it's,
Right.
but sometimes we can, let that take over. And so how do we just say, yeah, this is hard. I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to feel it. It's not
Yep.
easy, but okay, what can I do? So, I just feel that too. I love that. And I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Yep. No problem.
Awesome. All right. So, anything else as our Live Prosperous community is getting to know you? Anything else you want to share? Because they're going to see lots of you, but anything I didn't ask?
I think I feel I also would like to share that everything that we're talking about, most people, I believe, already know.
Hmm.
The difference is that we were saying earlier today is the what is between the belief and the knowing.
Yeah.
And I think that these types of conversations and your dearth of knowledge and training and experience, Beth, you help to normalize and bite size the
Hmm.
things that we do know, but we don't acknowledge. And so I really appreciate being part of this conversation and being part of the strategy forward to be able to bring more to people in the most digestible way that
Hmm.
they need. And I'll say that in 2024, the rate at which we're all moving, just sort of echoing our earlier, also part of our earlier
Hmm.
conversation, we're
Hmm.
moving
Sure.
so fast, so fast. And it's really, really important that we know we're moving that fast so that we can be intentional about just taking a pause here
Yeah.
and there to appreciate what we already know. We already know we need to be kind to ourselves. We already know that if we need help with something, we need to ask for it. And I
Hmm.
think the Live Prosperous community is it's providing lots of resources and will provide even more for people to be able to lean on that and get whatever they need in the amount of time that they have to give to that attention. I also think, it's now we're in October and we've got a big election coming up and lots of different
Hmm.
conversations are
Sure.
happening and it can get really personal. It can feel like there's no air in the room for whatever your beliefs might be.
Mhm.
And as much as we can practice being kind to ourselves about whatever our beliefs are, whatever it is that we might want, then we can be able to exist in this world where somebody
Right.
else might have different beliefs. And
Hmm.
that is the goal, is that we can all exist here together. And so I just really appreciate being able to have this chat with you
Yeah.
and to be able to be joining the community. And I'm really excited, looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And just when you're talking about different views and existing with one another, I think this back to the curious compassion. What I do believe the more that I've shown that to myself and the more that I've gotten curious about different parts of me that might need to speak or might have feelings or, traumas or things, the more I've started to look at other people in that way.
Yeah,
And, I work a lot with internal family systems, and I think it's a really fun way to kind of have access to some of this.
yeah,
And, oftentimes I'll look at people and I'll think, oh, you're just a person made of parts, just like I am. We're just all walking around like that. So I do think it's that extension. And so I think as we're working together, you and I, and Live Prosperous, and working with organizations, individuals, all kinds of people, I think we can just continue to encourage that. And I'm excited to partner with you. I'm excited to have you as a part of our team. I look forward to more interviews and more ways in which we're gonna, let people enjoy you and learn from you. I appreciate you so much and appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Right
Very
back at
good.
it.
Take care, my friend.
You
Talk
too.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.